What is the point value of a queen, a rook, a bishop, a knight, and a pawn? And how can a pawn transform into a queen? Find out. We are about to study to the end of Chapter 2 in E.S. Lowe's Chess in 30 Minutes, pages 36 to 40. Subheadings: Comparative value of the pieces and the pawn's promotion power. In just a few minutes, stay tuned. Podcast Miniseries, E.S. Lowe's Chess in 30 Minutes, Study and Practical Application, read by Jeremy Morrill. Subheading: Comparative values of the pieces, and the second subheading, the pawn's promotion power, pages 36 to 40. Chess in 30 Minutes, Paperback by E.S. Lowe. Published in January 1st, 1955, 5 out of 5 stars. Barb 1992 said, 5 stars. Good handy book. Reviewed in the United States on May 14th, 2014. Verified purchase. Book is in really good condition. Arrived before scheduled time. Member of my family has had it for years. Now I can learn playing chess from my own copy. Clear and simple guide for a beginners. Buy this book on Amazon. Link in the description. 36. Next subheading. We have comparative values of the pieces. Now it is time to draw a very important conclusion. The queen or the rook can enforce checkmate. The bishop or the knight cannot. Therefore, the queen or rook must be stronger than the bishop or knight. Consequently, we need some yardstick to show us what pieces are the strongest and which are less strong. This yardstick will enable us to judge the comparative strength of two different pieces. The following table of comparative values is based on centuries of chess playing and is thoroughly reliable. In this table, we give each of the chessmen a standard value. The king is not included in this table, for his value is absolute. Here are the values. Queen, 9 points. Rook, 5 points. Bishop, 3 points. Knight, 3 points. And pawn, 1 point. You can draw many useful conclusions from this table. The main point is that the queen is by far the most valuable piece. If you lose your queen by an oversight, you are almost 100% certain to lose the game, unless your opponent makes an even worse oversight. The table tells us a great deal about making exchanges. An exchange takes place when you capture one of your opponent's forces and he captures one of yours in return. If you are not familiar with the table of values, then exchanges will give you a great deal of trouble. Of course, if you capture a pawn in return for a pawn, or a bishop in return for a bishop, that exchange is perfectly even. But suppose you capture, next page, page 37, a knight, and your opponent captures one of your bishops. Who gains by such an exchange? Look at the table. A bishop is worth 3 points, and so is a knight. So the exchange of bishop for knight is perfectly even, and neither player loses by it. On the other hand, suppose you capture a rook, brackets, which is worth 5 points, and your opponent gets only a pawn, brackets, which is worth 1 point in return. Obviously, this is no even exchange, and you have gained considerably by the transaction. Memorize a simple table of values. By being thoroughly familiar with it, you will always know whether you are ahead or behind in material. This is important, for if a player's superiority in material is great enough, he will be able to force checkmate. Sometimes, when a player has lost too much material, he does not wait for checkmate. Conceding defeat, he quote-unquote resigns. Just what amount of superiority in material makes it hopeless to play on? Given the enormous value of the queen and her checkmating powers, you may be sure that a player who has lost his queen without any compensation is sure to lose the game. Similarly, a player who loses a rook without exchange is certain to lose the game, and a bishop or knight ahead will generally lead to victory. Next subheading, the pawn's promotion power, page 37. But how about a pawn? Is a player likely to win if he is quote-unquote only a pawn ahead? Remember, the pawn is the weakest unit on the board. Here we come to one of the most fascinating paradoxes in chess. Although the pawn is the weakest unit on the chessboard, it is potentially the strongest. Page 38. This is why, if a pawn advances progressively from the second row all the way to the 8th row during the course of a game, the pawn is promoted to a new queen or rook or bishop or knight. The player who advances the pawn has the option of promoting to whatever piece he pleases. Naturally, he will choose a new queen, that being the strongest piece on the board. There are, in very rare cases, special reasons for promoting to a weaker piece. Thus, it is possible to have more than one queen at the same time. Of course, the chances that a pawn will remain unscathed throughout the games are not very great. Nevertheless, you have 8 pawns to start with, and if only one of them is preserved from capture, that may well be the pawn that wins the game. The possibility of changing the humble pawn into the mighty queen is one of the factors that makes chess a wonderful fighting game. In view of this fact, it is very important for you to be familiar with several facets of pawn promotion. First of all, let's see how it works. Diagram 27 brackets white to move, how the pawn queens. We have black king on the top row of the chessboard, and 2 spaces below we have the white king below, and to the right 2 spaces to the right we have the white pawn. Next paragraph, in the position of diagram 27, white is quote-unquote only a pawn ahead. It is his move, and he advances the pawn. Next page, page 39, to the last row. It is exchanged for a queen, and the new queen gives check. In fact, black is checkmated. This gives you a graphic idea of the enormous power that is inherent in pawn protection. In diagram 28, we have another impressive example of the pawn's power. We have diagram 28, white brackets, white to move, the power of the pawn. So we have on the second row of the top of the chessboard, we have on the white space, we have a black king, and right next to the black king on the black space, the black square, is a white pawn. And on a diagonally below the white pawn on a black square, we have a white king. And diagonally down to the white space, the white square, we have a white bishop below. As you study the position of diagram 28, imagine that the white pawn is off the board. In that event, white cannot win the game, as his bishop cannot force checkmate. but with the pawn on the board, white wins. He will advance his pawn to the 8th row, obtaining a new queen. Black's king cannot capture this queen, as it is protected by white's bishop. With the aid of this new queen, white will force checkmate in short order. Thus, the presence of the pawn makes all the difference in the world. Next paragraph, you can't always be sure of keeping the newly promoted pawn that has become a queen. Nevertheless, there is still an advantage to be gained from the new queen. Page 39. Moving on to page 40. Last page of the chapter. The point is neatly made in the play with diagram 29. Black advances his queen pawn to the 8th rank. So we have diagram 29, black to move. Pawn promotion wins material. So we have the black king on the black square here and the black pawn on the white square above. To the right, we have a two spaces to the right on a black square, we have a white king. And below, somewhere on an angle on a black square is a black knight. And below to the angle to the left side is a black pawn, and to the right we have a white knight on a black square. Black advances his queen pawn to the 8th rank and promotes it to a queen. White naturally captures the queen with his knight. Black then captures white's knight with his own knight. Black's new queen is no longer on the board, and yet black has a very easy win. As in diagram 28, previously we looked at it. We'll look at it again. He will advance his remaining pawn to the last row. The pawn will be quite safe, escorted by the black knight and king. Thus, black wins easily in diagram 29, even though his new queen immediately disappears. In such cases, queening is not an end in itself. It is a means of winning material. In this instance, black won white's last remaining piece by queening the passed pawn. Familiarity with the queening possibilities outlined here will win many games for you. We turn now to several other important rules of chess. So just to review what we learned so far, we have both the black and the white queen. Queens are worth 9 points. Rooks are worth 5 points. Bishops are worth 3 points. Knights are worth 3 points. And a pawn is worth 1 point each. We have the first diagram of the subheading, diagram 27, white to move. How the pawn queens. We have the black king here on section E8 and the white king on section E6, and the pawn, the white pawn on section G7. Next diagram, we have diagram 28, white to move. The power of the pawn. We have the black king on section F7, the white king on section D6, the bishop, the white bishop on section A4, and the white pawn in between the two kings on section E7. Diagram 29. Black to move. Pawn promotion wins material. Moving around the chessboard a little bit more so you can see more of it, we have the black king on section C5. The white pawn on section C6. The black pawn on section D2. The black knight on section E3. the white knight on section F2 and the white king on section G5. And thus ends page 40, and thus ends chapter 2, Winning Methods in Chess. We'll take a little break here, folks, and we'll tune in next time where we'll be reading chapter 3, Other Important Rules, on page 41.